turn of events that has sent shockwaves, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has declared a state of emergency in Rivers State, a region now engulfed in political chaos, following escalating tensions among key political figures, particularly between prominent personalities such as former Governor Nyesom, the current Governor Siminalayi Fubara, and Speaker of the Rivers State House of Assembly, Amaewhule. The situation in Rivers State has become a focal point of national concern as rival factions clash over power and control. Tensions reached a boiling point as Governor Fubara faced mounting criticism. A suspension announced by the presidency marks a dramatic shift in the political landscape, effectively sidelining a sitting governor. Wike, a formidable force in Rivers State politics, has not remained silent in the face of this turmoil. His legacy as a former governor and his ongoing influence loom large over the current administration. The rapport between Wike and Fubara has been fraught with contention, and as the crisis deepens, concerns mount over the potential for violence and instability within Rivers State. In an unexpected maneuver, President Tinubu has appointed Vice Admiral Ete Ibas as the sole administrator of Rivers State. This decision, while intended to restore order, raises questions about the future of democratic governance in the state. This is Viewpoint. Join us shortly. I'm Olaitan Babatunde, and with me is Odeawa here. How are you doing today, Odeawa?
Perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm sure you're ready for the questions on today's episode.
Definitely. The crisis has been lingering for a year plus now, so it's worth talking about in lingering. It has actually got tongues wagging and, bugging people's ears.
Yes, all right. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So Odeawa, we're talking about Fubara issue with the president also declaring a suspension recently and asking the governor to step down. Now, in what ways can the imposition of a state of emergency be justified in the context of Nigeria's political history, and what lesson can be learned from past events?
Well, to begin with, what actually has caused the Rivers State crisis, of course, relating it to some historical episodes which I will mention, is actually a case of seeking political relevance or dominance. Relevance in the sense that probably a former sitting executive must have been out of the way and still wants to seek relevance in where he or she has just left office from. And dominance in the sense that you want to actually control the resources within that region or that locale. Now, it's common knowledge that Rivers State is the oil capital of the country. And if we look at it, Rivers State, you're talking about Bayelsa. These are states where the oil companies, just to mention a few, like Shell, top big boys like, let me mention Shell because that one is quite pronounced over there. Now, what point am I trying to make? It's common knowledge that Nigeria is quite dependent on oil. And being dependent on oil, they don't want to lose that asset, particularly at the center. Now, going over to historical analysis or relaying it to today's episode, before oil was even discovered, we had chaotic events in the West, which was now termed as the Wild Wild West, where they even had to term it some kind of Operation Wet Year, where prominent political figures were lynched and set ablaze with their property, in the sense that they wanted to control resources in that particular region, because at that point in time, the major export there was cocoa. So if we look at it, if people or warring factions or warring people are actually coming and at loggerheads, locking horns, it's actually because they are actually fighting for a particular key instrument or resource in that particular region. Now we hear about Borno, which also had Sambisa, Boko Haram, banditry, and the Lord, just to make sure if you... I want to believe that there's also a resource there actually which is going on. That is why conflict is actually going on in that particular locale. It's only with time it will now begin to find out or uncover these truths. Now, coming down to Rivers State, analytically speaking from a political point of view, we look at it that Rivers State has never had any other party ruling it other than the PDP. Right from Peter Odili up onto Rotimi Amechi, then Nyesom Wike, who is currently serving under the APC government. And if we look at it, we'll call him a Judas when it comes to the PDP, because he actually marred the antics or tricks of the PDP in clinching the seat. Now we begin to ask ourselves some rhetorical question. Are you actually serving the state or serving the APC ruling government? That's another question, because if we look at it, relaying it to the incidents that happened to the 60s, which was between Awolowo and Ladoke Akintola. We also look at it where state of emergency was declared by Tafawa Balewa.
Yeah.
Now, when this state of emergency was actually declared, it was because the area had turned into a wild, wild west axis where I mentioned Operation Wet here, where people were being killed. Now, when people are being killed, it means that there's public disorder. There's no safety. Now, what actually does the Constitution actually say now concerning declaring a state of emergency? It therefore means that one's country's territorial integrity has actually been abused. But in this case here, it is an internal fight. So you call the warring factions who actually, okay, probably is actually the premier of the Western region, or this fellow is a state chief executive. You bring them together and there's always room for dialogue. Dialogue should always be the way forward. Not a case whereby you begin to supplant totalitarianism in a democratic setting. So in the long run, this will not be actually advisable, bringing in a state of emergency within a democratic system of government.
All right. So according to a video that I saw of the president, he was talking about the crisis in River State, and also that he feels like it might tamper with the people of the state's democracy. However, I also read an article where the traditional leaders in River State said that there is peace in River State, so therefore the declaration of emergency is not justifiable. And also the NBA are also in support of Fubara. So in your own opinion, this is just your own opinion. If it were to be an APC candidate that is presiding as the governor in River State, do you think the president would have asked for him to step down and replace him?
Or probably even suspended.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at it, I began by stating earlier on about relevance and dominance. Now, it's a case of power grab. Majority of the states within the country now, as we speak now, are APC ridden.
Yeah.
About 11 or 12 are PDP clinching. Now, if we go over to the National Assembly, the same thing is also playing out. The APC has the major say. And it's a case of making sure that they have their strongholds. River State is a stronghold because of its oil-producing capacity. Yeah. Now, with this oil, and just recently they had completed the refinery there, which was a few months back, which of course there were still some shabby rumors around it, whether it was completed or not completed or yet to be completed. So all these things come into play. Now, you coming in to declare a state of emergency, and people within River State are saying that there is peace there. But when in fact, Nyesom Wike now, who is actually filling in as this FCT minister under the APC regime, still claiming to be a PDP member. Now, this is kind of conflicting. Why? Because when you come down home, at least it's like a family circle. People know the black sheep within the family.
Sure.
But the family will never begin to castigate you there in public. It is you who will go castigating yourself in public. And the family will never want to deny its own feces. They will make sure they look for a way to cover their own feces. Now, as we speak now, Nyesom Wike, if we will be blunt and tell ourselves the truth, has actually been I would say it's karma catching up with him, because it's what he actually did to Rotimi Amechi by trying to let him know he cannot be controlled while he's ruling the state. Now, you are out of power, and you are now creating confusion and showcasing tantrums and trying to make sure, it's probably, maybe in my opinion, he is trying to convey River State as a gift to the APC government, because within that axis, the South-South region, the Southeast, you only have Imo State, which is dominated by the APC. Anambra State is dominated by ABGA. Okay. Then other Igbo-speaking states like Abia is dominated with Labour Party. So the Southeast and the South-South axis, they operate a transparent form of democracy, let me put it that way. Not a case whereby there are two dominant parties or one particular party is dominant in a particular region. There's always this balance when it comes to game playing amongst political parties. So APC on its own part is looking for a way, or the APC administration now as we speak now, is looking for a way through the FCT minister to actually win or grab River State, which is actually the oil capital of the country, knowing very well that they will have a say. And this is what the Rivers people do not like. And if we go down, of course, news making the rounds, we've had so many people backing Fubara. Fubara on his own part, fine, yes, there are no winners, there are no losers. Everyone has committed one offense or the other. By demolishing the State House of Assembly, he was actually wrong concerning doing that. But to pursue peace, he decided to concede with the recent Supreme Court ruling, by going over to meeting the 27 lawmakers who had actually, like, defected. But yet still, they still fell on deaf ears. So assuming Fubara on his own part was actually defiant concerning some things, not willingly ready to embrace peace, then it would have been okay to dictate a state of emergency. Secondly, a state of emergency should have been declared if the pipelines were being invaded by neighboring countries, or probably the militants we used to see in the 90s, and just to mention Niger Delta Avengers, just to mention a few, will come in and begin to vandalize the pipelines, which will actually bring in proceeds for the country. That is when you declare a state of emergency, where there is war within that axis. But this time around, the war is actually between two people who have not decided to see themselves or are daggers drawn, not the people who are actually fighting themselves. Now, because the people now have actually decided to support their chief executive, and the current administration is not getting what they ought to get, and we ought to tell ourselves the truth, because I don't see any logical reasoning behind suspending the state's governor when it's not stipulated in the constitution. There's a process to follow concerning suspending or impeaching the governor, and that process wasn't actually followed. Now, if actually we're even transparent enough, I think probably Nyesom Wike should also have been suspended, because he has also been a key factor in the whole River State theatrics of the whole play.
All right. I think I agree with you that this might be gimmicks from the presidency, because looking at it, if the people of the state are saying that everything is peaceful there, I don't really see a reason why they should declare a state of emergency. They could have just allowed everything play out the way it should. But now looking at this, we also know that because I saw it online where Fowles the bad guy, is a lawyer, he stated that no president has the right to suspend a presiding governor, a governor of the state, that it is not written in the constitution. So I'd like to know, this means that if we should look at it, it means that the president literally undermine the human right and the democracy of the governor of the state. So I would like to talk about democracy and federalism. What long-term impact do you think the president's decision would have?
Well, if we look at it, talking about long-term effects, we have to fall back on the constitution, which is referred to as the established laws guiding the land. Now, these established laws are the rules and regulations in which even the president who has even sworn allegiance to protect and stick to and rule the country by. Now, a situation whereby it is stipulated in section 188 of the constitution that a governor can be impeached through defined legal processes. Now, these legal processes were not even followed. Now, 305 actually states that, section 305 actually states that there will be a reason why there will be a state of emergency. And it doesn't even specify that even after the state of emergency, there will be a suspension for a follow-up. No, it's not defined, because the roles the chief executive, that's the presidency, actually has, also the state's governor also has, but only on a lesser level. While the president is actually dealing with concurrent issues, the governor is also dealing with residual issues. What point am I trying to make? They both have functions, but he is serving at the center, he is serving at the state level. So both rules and regulations apply to them. Why? Because ultimately they were elected by the people. The people at the state level elected the state's governor, and the people on a nationalistic note elected the president. So the constitution actually defines their roles, but on a different level or different pedestal. But he has no right to suspend the governor. There is always a process, and the process is always called impeachment. If the governor has been found wanting in office, maybe maladministration or one scandal or the other, or maybe he has not been living up to tasks, then even the House of Reps, the State House of Reps now to be specific, has the right to impeach by moving a motion. But now as it is now, we could see it as political maneuvering, because even the 27 lawmakers that even cross-carpeted or defected to the APC are being backed by Nyesom Wike, who is under the APC administration. So definitely sentiments will set in and tensions will rise. Feuds will begin to increase.
All right, so let's talk about the suspension of Fubara. How does this situation, how does this development contradict or outline was in the constitution?
Well, the suspension of Fubara, which of course people have not really been buying into, has really got tongues wagging. We look at it as, earlier on I mentioned Section 188 and 305.
Yeah.
Let's zero in on Section 188. It actually states that there will be a clearly defined legal process for the governor to be impeached or taken out of office or suspended. Now, a situation whereby you just suspend the governor, why? Because there's ethnic issues or security concerns. There are no security concerns if the people of Rivers State actually say that there is peace there.
Yeah.
It's a case whereby there's a disorder, and the disorder will come from a system of anarchy, or probably there's an invasion. Being a riverine area close to the waters, there's an invasion by external forces or factors who have actually come in, just as state of emergency was cleared or done in somewhere in a few states in the north. But for you now to suspend Fubara, it doesn't actually should go down well, because he's not the only bad boy here, as he's been termed as or described in the whole situation. The Rivers State lawmakers, all encompassing, whether you are PDP, Labour Party, SDP, or whatever party you belong to, you're also bad boys there too. Sure. And also Nyesom Wike, who is serving as the FCT minister under the APC administration, should also be portrayed as a bad boy, because when you've left office, it's believed that you have left that particular office. Yeah. Allow them to do the business or governance of the day. Then you concentrate on the FCT ministerial roles in which you've been assigned to do. These are two different functions. But the situation whereby you begin to seek selfish relevance, that is where we have carried on this crux of quarrel right from 2023 up until 2025. And if it begins to or continues to, and factually speaking, Fubara has not really enjoyed his office, because they're already talking about 2027 elections. And before you say Jack, he's been suspended for 6 months now, with a vice admiral now filling in as sole administrator for 6 months. Now, if the 6 months now should elapse, he won't have enough time to begin to plan to satisfy the people of Rivers State. So it's a political maneuvering for people to now begin to shift their attention from, oh, PDP, what did they do? So it is the ignorant people who actually, the ignorant electorate who actually come and begin to vote for any other party that comes to give them an offer they can't refuse. All
right, looking at the situation, well, maybe it's not something that I can compare with what happened in Osun State, where a former governor is still trying to have a hold in the state. But it's looking like a pattern, because the governor in Osun State is also PDP. And then during the local government election, there was a little bit of crisis, which even made the governor, to release a press. And now the same thing is happening in Rivers State. So it's already looking like a pattern towards the PDP members. Is this a way of taking charge of all the states in the country? I mean, like the APC trying to do that, or it's just circumstances, and maybe it's just our thought anyways. But then I would like to know, there's a conflict between Fubara and Nyesom Wike. Now, in my own opinion, do you think this might influence public perception of governance and political authority in Rivers State?
Well, when it comes to public perception, we should look at it at how literate are the Rivers people, how well informed are the Rivers people concerning the meandering and maneuvering concerning the whole conflict between Fubara and Nyesom Wike. Because if you look at it, I mentioned Kama catching up with Nyesom Wike, because what he did to Rotimi Amechi is now being meted out on him. But if we look at it, Fubara has just come in. Fine, he must have been active in politics in Rivers State, or active in Rivers State politics, but you have not given him you say he's your godson when you brought him into power. I believe that, as it's said in worldly language, the son must do better than the father. So it's expected that, being out of office, it would have been expected that he gave him guidance. Looking at how well he performed in Rivers State, he would have given him guidance on how to run Rivers State, not for him to assert dominance as a governor who has actually left office.
I think it's quite difficult for former governors to want to help the current governor. It hasn't happened in a long while, because most times, even if the former governor started the project, most times when the new governor comes in, they don't continue from there. Now, considering historical precedents set by former president like Jonathan and Obasanjo, how might President Tinubu's action be interpreted in the context of Nigerians' political evolution and the balance of power between state and federal?
You have the exclusive list, which belongs to the center, which is the presidency. Then you now have the residual list, which is being run by the state government, and the concurrent list now being run side by side with both the center and the state government. Now, relaying it now to the Jonathan administration and the OBJ administration, state of emergency was declared in their own parts. When it comes to matters involving the residual matters, that is when the center will actually come in, because what affects the states will one way or the other affect the center also. That is where both of them now have to work on the state and the federal government level. What point am I trying to make here? You can actually declare a state of emergency when there is apparent public disorder, or probably when there is actually war, or whether it is sensed by your national security advisors that actually security concerns or the security there is actually being threatened. But not suspending a governor, because take for instance in Yobe, Adamawa and Borno states, which of course was bandit reading during the Jonathan administration, he actually declared a state of emergency but did not suspend the governors, actually bailing him. Now we look at OBJ. Of course, we know Baba, coming from the military background, was a no-nonsense person. We saw what he did in Odi. You make trouble, he goes all out. Coming from a warfare background, I think he has seen a lot coming from where the Civil War, just to mention a few. So
he's always guarded.
Thank you. So he actually suspended the Ekiti governor for there was some disorder going on at that point in time. Then even in Plateau State also, he made sure he declared a state of emergency there because there was some certain disorder going. But if we look at, there were rational reasons behind their approach. But if you now come to the aspect of Tinubu, let's be frank, it appears Tinubu lacks diplomacy. Okay. Or his advisors lack diplomacy tact. Why? Because when initially he came in, subsidy is gone. That is what people are still using to hunt him. How well, positively or negatively, the subsidy disappearance now is having its effect or total effect now or impact is what we cannot say. It's just a matter of time. Also, declaring war on the 3 Sahel states. We're talking about Burkina Faso, Niger, and the third country. The 3 Sahel nations, which have actually broken away from ECOWAS now as we speak now. You have to declare war with them, particularly Niger. You don't assume office as a chairman of a regional bloc and begin to declare war with a particular country that has decided to cede from a particular group. Why did you cede from the group? That's dialogue setting in. A question has been asked. So the room for dialogue now has been set in. But he didn't give that venue for Fubara and Nyesom Wike only twice. Twice was not enough. It should have been a continuous process. Because if we look at it, when there was war in the Lagos State House of Assembly, I believe a state of emergency should have been declared for you to have seen the DSS actually there.
All right, so lastly, I would like to know your own opinion, not as a political analyst. Do you think the decision made by the president is right? Or do you think this decision was made for the people, or probably because of their political party and on their own selfish gain?
Well, I would say there are two sides to it. I will support security concerns because of the bombing of the pipeline.
No, but the people of the states now said it's peaceful over there.
I'm still coming there because the tensions rose when Fubara was threatened to be impeached. Pipelines were vandalized and they were bombed. So that alone is a security concern. I don't feel, as now as we speak, I don't think or see or have heard that people have taken responsibility for that. So that alone is a threat to the community around there, because lives will be lost as a result of bombing or vandalism of the pipeline, because it's like going to be like wildfire. I will also stick to the opinion of being selfish, sticking to selfish interests. Why? Because I will fall back on what I said ab initio, which has to do with political relevance and dominance. Why? Because of states grab, because of the resources in that particular region.
Thank you, Odiawa, for your insight on the issue going on in Rivers State. The festering crisis in Rivers State has become a present danger to the democracy. The lead characters in the old mess, Governor Siminalayi Fubara and his predecessor Nyesom Wike, has been at daggers drawn since Fubara assumed office in 2023. Rivers has been crippled by this godfather syndrome in Nigeria. Former Governor Rotimi Amaewhule fell out with the former governor of the state and his godfather, Peter Odili. Amaewhule also had battles with his successor, Wike. Now Wike has fallen out with his successor, Fubara. The stakeholders in Rivers should bury their differences in the state's interest. The show has been Viewpoint, and I've been your host, Olaito Babatunde, and with me has been Odiawa Here. Do well to follow us on all our social media platforms at VG Media. Thank you for watching.